Recently, I made a video covering CNC's glorious return to Steam, and after I'd personally summited Copium Mountain, speculating on a potential second remastered collection coming sometime in the future, I had to come to my senses and think about reality again, unfortunately. At the same time, asking myself some confronting questions. Questions like, is this a realistic future? And most importantly, is there a real future for Command & Conquer at all? It's an interesting question because I don't think a series like CNC can survive purely on dreams, remasters, and shitty mobile games alone. Link to that video in the description. Let's look at Age of Empires as an example. Yes, the Definitive Edition remakes for Age 2 and 3 were big hits, and they do continue to pull in significant numbers, but the revival of Age of Empires was a multi-pronged assault. It didn't just rely on a good remaster, a dream of the future, or a bad mobile game. It used all of these elements, and more, to drum up excitement for the series. And as its knockout blow, released an actually new, fully fledged game that was pretty great on its own. And again, that continues to pull in players as well. What I'm saying is that I don't think Age of Empires' return to form would have been nearly as successful if it had just, say, released Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, or just Age of Empires 4. And certainly not just Age of Empires Mobile, which, isn't looking great, but I'll withhold judgment until it's out. It required all of these games to collectively bring Age of Empires back into the public consciousness, and effectively revive the series to a point where I'd wager it's more popular now in terms of raw numbers than it ever has been before. And if you're looking to do that for a series, especially in a more niche genre like real-time strategy, you have to be doing that. You have to think big. You cannot simply rely on one game or one remaster to bring everyone back and keep them there. You need reasons for people to stay, off-ramps for players to take to play other games in the series, and reasons for people to come back. Let's get back to Command & Conquer then. Think back to when the Command & Conquer Remastered Collection came out. We were all excited and hyped up for the release. It came out and, yep, it was great. And it peaked at over 40,000 concurrent players on Steam. Sweet, hell yeah, Command & Conquer is back, right? Well, no, not really. Because we all know what happened after a week or two. The player base left. They had their fill of nostalgia, and they moved on to something else. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. EA made their money, we played the game, and then we moved to a new thing. But it's hardly the great revival of Command & Conquer, is it? It was simply a fun detour down memory lane. And aside from the 1,000 or so players who still boot it up every day, it's not really what you'd call a thriving player base. So what is the future for the series then? Well, I can see a few directions where EA could take Command & Conquer in the coming years. And the first one could be a full-scale revival of CNC, in the same vein as Age of Empires. But in order for that to properly happen, a few things need to go down, and it has to be a joint operation. And remember, this is what could actually happen, or what I think could actually happen. Not some pie-in-the-sky pipe dream that has no chance at all, like if we say we want to delete Command & Conquer 4 and make a new sequel to Tiberium Wars, because, come on, that's just not going to happen in any world. First, there would be another remaster to get people engaged and excited for the series again. Tiberian Sun and Red Alert 2 are the obvious choices, but frankly, I could see a Generals and 0 Hour kind of all-in-one package remaster happen too. The stakes would be lower, there could probably be things reused from Generals 2, and there's less that could go wrong, where people would be upset about mishandling a gem like Red Alert 2. After this remaster came out, word would need to start spreading about a brand new release. And like I said, while we'd all love to see a revisit to the end of the Tiberium saga, I do legitimately think that that ship has sailed for good, and we have what we have. I think the most likely option would be a sequel to Generals. Maybe not Generals 2 exactly, but some sort of spiritual successor maybe. Basically, it would need to be a clean starting point with a game that's entirely standalone. No baggage, no established characters, just a pure, clean slate. I mean, you could also do like a reboot of the Tiberium saga, or some alternate timeline, but even then you're going to have to contend with having Nod and GDI in there, and then if you don't have Kane, people are going to be mad. So yeah, standalone, semi-future or lightly futuristic style, kind of like a Battlefield 2142 level of technology maybe. It could be a world in the early days of Tiberium exposure, maybe with new factions and less of a sci-fi angle. I think that could work. Lastly, for a full revival to actually work properly, there has to be a clear path forward for the franchise. Whether that comes in a new trilogy of connected games, or simply expansions for the current remasters or new releases, somehow, somewhere, it needs to be obvious that CNC is back, for real. Only then can the franchise truly be revived, and not simply have a spark of life and then be put back on ice for another decade. Or two. The next future is one that I personally think is the most likely. It still retains a lot of the money-making capability of the Command & Conquer license for EA, but it doesn't require a ton of effort or the full-scale dedication to the IP that would be required for a full revival. And I've talked about this before. I've gone on record saying that I think there'll be a new remastered collection sometime in the not so distant future, and there's a lot of money to be made there. Imagine a Red Alert 2 remastered, or Tiberian Sun, or Generals remastered. Properly done, like the first collection, that would absolutely fly off the, well, proverbial shelves. EA can still license out the Command & Conquer IP for some shitty mobile games, or maybe even some not so shitty ones, and they can make a few bucks, but they can keep the majority of the fanbase pleased with proper attention given to the mainline releases. And even leave the door open for an actual revival, if and when they want to spend some proper money and proper manpower to make it happen. I've saved this last future to the end as, well, it's just kind of sad, but it's also, unfortunately, totally possible, maybe even likely. Maybe EA just doesn't see any spark of life left for Command & Conquer, despite the signs we keep giving. Maybe they're all too happy to just keep licensing the IP out to terrible mobile games every few years, just because, well, they're not doing anything else, and they're not planning to do anything else with the franchise. It's hard to say how possible a future like this really is. From a fan perspective, it seems crazy. Like, how many times can you or I prove to EA that we want more Command & Conquer, and we're willing to pay for it? How many times can we show that the fanbase is here? It's just dormant, waiting to be given the opportunity to open our wallets to a worthwhile project. But from their point of view, maybe those numbers, even if they're tangible, just aren't that important or don't make sense. If they can make, I don't know, let's pull a number from thin air and say $10 million from a mainline Command & Conquer game that requires years of management, effort and investment, but they can make $100 million from another month of EA Sports FC just not doing anything, then maybe they just don't care, and they're happy to let this old IP wither away into nothing, as it is simply just not worth their time. I genuinely have no idea what they're thinking over there, but why even bother with the first remastered collection if you had no intention of doing anything else with the series? Why bring all the games to Steam? Just for the hell of it? Like, stuff like this costs money, a lot of it. And I don't know if the return on selling a few copies on Steam is really worth the hassle. So perhaps there is more to it. Maybe there's a greater plan underway here. Only time will tell. I'd love to hear your guys' genuine thoughts on this. What do you think is the most likely, properly for real? Not your dreams. What do you think is actually going to happen? Again, we'll all see with time, but I'm certainly hoping for a bright future for Command & Conquer. Thanks for watching, and if you like what I do here, consider throwing me a buck on Patreon. You'll join legends like Takayo, Bad Ghosts, Sean, Grey Spirit 4, George, Needers, John Kaiser, King Thickums, Pavel Bram, Christian, Dan, Bishop's Arch, Orion, Das Rufkin, and Cameron. And my paladins, of course, Johnny Woof, Marika, Age of Cause, Joe, Tank, and Empyrean. Thanks very much everyone, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.